I remember saying to them, like I said, I got to investigate her now. I got a bad feeling. I didn't have a bad feeling. God gave me a good brain. I already knew. I dropped the ball. I apologize. She's a globalist agent. I dropped the ball and I failed you, and I'm sorry. I got to follow my gut every time. It's never wrong. And I saw so much more she did. And I love her people threatening me and all their doxing of people and all that. You think that's going to make me go away? All you did was wake me up like a nuclear test site waking up Godzilla. So just get your asses ready. Because you want a war? I want your war. I want it all. I want the doxing. I want the lies. I want the attacks. I'm going to take you on. Because you work for the deep state and the Democratic Party and the CIA and MI6, and I see your ass. So you just get ready. This ain't my first rodeo.
Oh, Alex Jones. It's not my first rodeo either, brother. Goodness gracious. Look, I love the Infowars crew. I still love Owen Schroyer, even though he's not there. I love Harrison Smith. I love Alex Jones. I do. I have a soft spot for him. I couldn't disagree more with him on this. For those that don't know, and hi, I'm back. Clint Russell, Liberty Lockdown. Thank you for sticking with me. I went to California to visit family. We're back. We're in business. All right, let's go. While I was away, the Fort Huachuca story absolutely exploded in a multitude of fashions. First off, obviously the allegations, basically, I think it was close to the last show before Candace Owens went on her holiday break. She has this guest appearance from this guy named Mitch Snow, and he's laying out this really seemingly far-fetched story, but he seems to be very confident in it, saying he's got 99% confidence in some of the peoples that he's naming there. But long story short, what he's alleging is that he's at this base called Fort Huachuca, and he's detained. And he says that the night prior, he sees someone that he believes was likely Erika Kirk. He details a whole bunch of other people that are in TPUSA, all the way up to Brian Harpole, the head of security for Charlie Kirk, which just 2 days later was then assassinated. So Candace Owens' framing on this was that it seems as if the military may have been involved in planning this attack against Charlie Kirk. I mean, that's clearly what she's insinuating, and I don't know whether or not that's valid. But what the claim was is that these people were all meeting on Fort Huachuca, and it was a very high-level brass military meeting. And Mitch, this guy who was present, basically assumes that this meeting was about the Charlie Kirk assassination, and that's why he brought it to Candace Owens, who then reported on it. Now, I think that Candace Owens is right, and I think that Mitch is telling the truth about having been there. Beyond that, I have no idea as to what is true or false. I mean, the guy is essentially saying that he thinks that he saw these people, but he's not 100% certain. Then things start to tip over. While Candace is away, the kids will play, and Valhalla VFT, who I've liked a lot of his coverage on this story as well, he goes absolutely nuclear.
In my investigation into Mitch Snow, what I have found is maybe one of the most horrific, appalling human beings I've ever come across. The amount of violence against women in his record, kidnapping, abuse, fraud. Oh, I have the proof. I have it all. I have all the documents. It's really, really, really bad.
So long story short, essentially Mitch Snow has what could be considered a checkered past. I've looked into it. Best I can tell, he was never convicted on any of these accusations. So I'm not going to jump to any conclusions about him being some terrible human being. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't really care. See, here's the thing. Sometimes liars tell the truth. Sometimes honest people lie. So what really matters is, was Brian Harpole, Charlie Kirk's head of security, at Fort Huachuca meeting with military brass a day prior to Charlie Kirk being assassinated? That is the only thing that matters here. It's a yes or a no. It's a binary. Mitch Snow and his testimony is kind of irrelevant because at this junction, all we need is an alibi. Hey, this is actually where I was. I'm Brian Harpole. I was over here. As of now, I think we only have alibis from one individual who was alleged to have been present there. And that's Cabot Phillips, which I don't have a real strong opinion on him other than the fact that it seems quite evident to me that Erika Kirk lied about dating Cabot Phillips in the years leading up to her dating and then marrying Charlie Kirk. Why she would lie about that, I don't know. There's lots of lies going around. That's just the truth. Maybe Mitch Snow is a liar too, TBD. But it's very, very simple. It's a yes or a no. Where were you on September 8th, 9th, 10th? That's it. That's all we need.
Accusation, which in effect you are, right? You're in effect saying, okay, Erika Kirk and the head of TPUSA security were at this pre-assassination planning meeting.
Erika was there, so you guys have to stop repeating that. It's Erika was never at that meeting, and that's another thing. I've never said Erika was at the meeting. Mitch has never said Erika was at that meeting. There was never an indication she was at that meeting. He did not see her on September 9th. It was Brian Harpole who was at that meeting.
If you want me to say, there's a picture of Erika Kirk with a ponytail, and from her past. That person matches who I saw at Fort Huachuca in the lobby the night before, and she was with that man in the lobby, and that man, he was present at that meeting the next morning. So
you had to put it at a percentage that you saw that the girl in the ponytail matches the description of Erika Kirk. What percentage would you put that at?
those are really rare eyes. That's 95 to 99%.
So that appears to be the major controversy right there. And I can clear this up for you. It's actually very straightforward. Mitch Snow is saying he thinks he saw Erika Kirk on September 8th, the night prior. He only alleges that he saw Brian Harpole at the meeting on the 9th. So that is the whole reason for this massive misunderstanding or op or whatever, is that it's 2 different days. Now, it is odd, and it would certainly be noteworthy if it is true that Brian Harpole was at this meeting with high-level military brass the day prior to Charlie Kirk's assassination. If it is true that he was there, and it is also true that Erika Kirk was there the night prior, that is definitely noteworthy and worthy of investigation. However, it is not alleged that she was present for that military high brass meeting. So I'm going to try and make this very straightforward. TPUSA. The ball is in your court. It has been in your court. All we are requesting, asking, pleading for is for you to give us some very straightforward answers. Brian Harpole is the most important person to be questioned right now. For one thing, even if it weren't for this allegation about Fort Huachuca, he is still the head of security that failed and allowed for this assassination to take place. He should be the person that you are most skeptical of off jump, because if you have a security failure, which you did, well, then the guy who's the head of that security ought to be questioned very, very sincerely. But what has TPUSA done instead? They provided a alibi for Erika Kirk for the 9th, the day that they're not even alleging that she was present at Fort Huachuca. So that didn't do us any good. And Brian Harpole, the most key figure in all of this, hasn't responded whatsoever, to my knowledge. So that's kind of the problem here. And all of this infighting is basically, it seems like there's a vacuum that was created because Candace Owens took a vacation, and now everyone's just trying to tear each other's throats apart because they, I don't know, want additional views or something. And a quick reminder.
Well, here's a good example. Harrison, you posted 2 weeks before Charlie Kirk died that there was a credible threat against his life. Has the FBI reached out to you to ask you about that?
No.
Also,
No.
are you going to tell us who that was? It feels like that might be relevant now.
Yeah, so in the absence of a rigorous investigation by the agency, we are led to lead this investigation. That is why Fort Huachuca is so relevant. But I was going to ask you, thank you, Candace, can you tell us who told you that? Because
he's
the
dead now.
FBI is not asking you.
Yeah, I mean, the person that told me asked me not to say who they were, so I'm not going to give up a source. Sorry.
Okay.
So now, because Alex Jones has been viciously attacking Candace Owens, people are going after Harrison Smith because he's not willing to turn over his source. I've had Harrison on the show. I know Harrison personally a little bit. We met at Ron Paul's 90th birthday party. I think he's a good guy. I think he's an honest guy. I think he's sincere. I think he's interested in the truth. I don't think he's a bad actor whatsoever. So let me just make that very clear. I also think that what he's doing with not turning over his source is the proper journalistic thing to do. So set all of that aside. I also do understand why, because his boss, Alex Jones, is nuking Candace Owens on the regular for days and days and days on end. Candace's supporters are, in turn, firing shots at Alex and Harrison. So this is all very logical. Makes a lot of sense. Doesn't feel good for Harrison, but I understand why. And I'll be honest, I would love to know who his source was, obviously. But I have an update on that, and I really appreciate Harrison posting about this. He said that he was contacted the day after that Twitter Spaces with Candace Owens, more than 3 months after the assassination, mind you. He was contacted by a government official, he didn't say who, and they asked for his source. And he did not give them his source, but he did say if you give me your contact information, I will give it to the source. And he said that he then turned over that contact information to the source, who said that he would contact that government official. So hooray, progress. But let's just think about how crazy it is that it required just a bunch of podcasters, a bunch of crazy, zany people on the internet pressuring and pressing on this story for 3+ months now, almost 4, just to get a government official to reach out to Harrison Smith, who had been loudly talking about this since day one. In fact, having posted about it publicly on X a month prior to the attack on Charlie Kirk, saying that he has been told by a source close to Charlie Kirk that essentially his life will be in jeopardy if he turns against Israel. And then he gets assassinated a month later, and nobody in the government for 100+ days thinks to themselves, I might want to reach out to that guy and see who that contact was. Let me just repeat that real quick. 30 days prior to his assassination, it is publicly posted by Harrison Smith, a prominent radio media personality for Infowars, saying that he has been told that Charlie Kirk fears for his life, specifically, explicitly, if he turns against Israel. He is then assassinated 30 days later, and then it comes out that thanks to Candace Owens, 2 days prior to that assassination, he is texting his group chat with the TPUSA guys, including Josh Hammer, who then lies about it for weeks, that he is under immense pressure, specifically because of platforming people like Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, etc., that he is hemorrhaging Israeli or pro-Zionist donors, and he has no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. That all happened. That's all true. And yet we're caught up in this massive shit-throwing fist fight with each other because Mitch Snow may not be telling the truth. Like, talk about getting way, way lost in the weeds here.
In August, before all this happened, he had a event where he had some donors at, and one of the first questions they asked was, God forbid if something happens to you, like what would happen next to Turning Point? And Charlie made a really interesting point. He said companies, example, Apple, Macintosh, he said they're founder-led. He said, but what I have built will one day, if I'm not around, be vision-led.
So according to Erika Kirk, the widow spouse of Charlie Kirk, in August, the very same month that Harrison Smith tweets out that Charlie fears for his life if he had been in the pro-Israel cause, he is telling Erika Kirk in her own words that one of the first questions that the donors asked is, what happens to TPUSA if you die?
The first questions they asked was, God forbid if something happens to you, like what would happen next to Turning Point?
And everybody's just like, Mitch Snow, why are we even fucking talking about this guy? It really feels like a massive distraction. And specifically what I'm saying is the distraction is his history, a character background. I don't care about any of that. It's either true or it's false. Was Brian Harpole at Fort Huachuca on September 8th in a meeting with military brass or not? If it's not, let's move on. If it's yes, well then bingo, Bob's your uncle. And just a reminder, at the highest levels of our government, they were all thinking the same thing that you and I are. So we're not the crazy ones.
I'll tell you something I haven't talked about publicly before, but in the days after Charlie's death, I struggled a great deal. I'm sure many of you did too. I remember watching every video of the assassination, looking for clues, trying to understand what happened. I'd try to hide my friend and that terrible bullet hitting him, but I would try to look around. I stayed up all night for many nights in a row, researching every conspiracy theory, going down every rabbit hole.
And while the vice president of the United States was going down rabbit holes on the internet, trying to figure out what the hell actually happened to Charlie Kirk, just like you and I were doing and continue to do, TPUSA was doing this.
This Turning Point kind of abomination, it's not relatable for people that talked about how Hollywood isn't relatable and Hollywood is out of touch. This looks a lot like Hollywood to most people. And to go out through a stream of fireworks and sparklers and stand there in a glittering pantsuit and talk about electing J.D. Vance 3 months after your husband was killed many people feel that there is something off about that. It feels like you're being played. You feel it. It seems off. You feel like this is a coordinated and choreographed spectacle. They want your money.
And as is usually the case, Tim Dillon nails it. We feel as if we're being played. We feel as if we're being lied to. We feel as if we're watching a spectacle as opposed to an investigation. That's because we are. 100% true. It feels as if Erika Kirk is putting on a performance as opposed to being a sincere, devastated widow. That's what it feels like. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's what it looks like. Now, let's also just kind of rewind. And I think maybe because I took 10 days off, it gives me a better, bird's eye view on all of this. We are really, really losing sight of what matters here. We have real hard evidence that Charlie Kirk was both afraid for his life if he had been in the pro-Israel cause, and B, saying 48 hours before he was assassinated that he had no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause. And we're all going to just be like, oh, that's nothing. That's everything, actually. And the Fort Huachuca angle, maybe it's nothing, but I'll tell you, the way people are just going absolutely ballistic at Candace Owens, it makes me feel like maybe it did happen. Because my initial reaction was like, nah, just being honest. Like, my initial reaction after watching him on Candace Owens a couple weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, was that it doesn't pass the sniff test to me. It seemed too convenient. This random guy is just sitting in this hotel and then gets detained, and he sees Cabot Phillips and Erika Kirk and Brian Harpole and all of these high-level brass, and he happens to be a former Green Beret and a former whistleblower against the Mexican cartels. He remembers all of these faces. Like, maybe it's just me because I have actually pretty good facial recognition or recall, but I just don't feel like if I was hanging out at a hotel 2 days before some tragic event happened that I would be like, yeah, I remember all the details about this. I just wouldn't. And I think very few people would. So my initial reaction was like, this dude's probably mistaken or, a liar. But given that Candace Owens has such an immense platform and that her questioning of this story has resulted in so much hatred and so much just vitriol and flipping out, while simultaneously paired with a bunch of, either alibis that were totally false or non-responses from the people that really matter, like Brian Harpole, makes me feel like maybe it did. Maybe we just got lucky. And Mitch Snow has this incredible memory. And he saw these people and he put the dots together and he reached out to Candace, and Candace opens her email. And it's the first email out of 50,000. And she goes, let me reach out to this guy. And then Bob's your uncle. They solved the case. Maybe. But I just got to say, whether it did or it didn't, the case is not closed, particularly if it didn't happen. I mean, if it did happen, that could be a real linchpin to getting to the truth here. And if it did happen, my goodness, that means our government's involved and it's a very, very big ordeal. But if it didn't happen, that doesn't suddenly mean that Tyler Robinson acted alone and nobody else knew and it's open and shut case. Basically, what I'm saying is the entirety of the investigation does not hinge on whether or not Mitch Snow is a reputable, honest person. It just simply doesn't. So let's keep it moving.
I mean, Candace Owens, the shit that comes out of her mouth, in a just society, she'd be in a mental ward right now. She would have been in a mental ward a while ago. Mm-hmm. I personally am a big proponent of bringing back the involuntary commitment laws of the 1960s. In my view, she should be involuntarily committed to a mental asylum.
Josh Hammer is trying to get people like you and I locked up for questioning this story. So let's just remember who the enemy is here. So a reminder, the guy who was on the group chat when Charlie Kirk was saying that he was under immense pressure from pro-Israel Zionist donors and that he had no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause, who then proceeded to lie about that fact for multiple weeks while Candace Owens was the only one telling us the truth about that, and while they were trying to completely, basically, hagiographize or just cement this pro-Israel legacy around Charlie Kirk, when the truth behind the scenes was far, far more complicated. He wants Candace Owens, and let's be honest, people like you and me and anybody else questioning this fucking narrative about Tyler Robinson, to be put in voluntary psychiatric holds. Basically, he wants us locked up in the loony bin. And I don't think, he wasn't smiling. That wasn't joking. That wasn't a hee ha ha. That was very sincere. And you should be asking yourself, one, why is asking a question about a public, high-profile political assassination and the nature and the facts behind it worthy of being put into an insane asylum? And 2, are those American values at all? And 3, why in God's name was this guy the advisor to Charlie Kirk when it came to pro-Israel matters? I'm going to continue to beat this drum until we get some fucking answers on these things, because I am not satisfied.
These motherfuckers are opening up a daycare and getting $10 million fucking dollars. This is fucking insane, dude. And
with no kids.
If this isn't the breaking point for everybody to stand the fuck up and say enough, then our country is fucking doomed. Period. 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 Okay? Donald Trump needs to feel all the fucking smoke over this. All of it. Okay? He needs to feel all of it over Israel. He needs to understand that he is violating the promises that he has made to the American people. Okay? I've always been a guy that has given that man tons and tons and tons of benefit of the doubt. But at this point in time, that shit is fucking over. If he doesn't do something about this, and he doesn't start arresting motherfuckers, and he doesn't hold people accountable for the Epstein shit and for this shit, he will go down, and not as the best president, he will go down literally as the man who had the opportunity to save this country and chose not to.
Boy, oh boy, that sentiment is pervasive amongst his base, his most ardent supporters, and I'm talking about Trump. So for those that aren't aware, and I'm sure most of you have already heard about this story, but I haven't talked about it yet, so I'm going to give you my take, and I actually have some insight into this that's really, really interesting and important. Nick Shirley is this 23-year-old investigative reporter, basically guerrilla journalism, and he goes into Minnesota. It looks like he's piggybacking off of Project Veritas's research from years ago, and he essentially just goes around to a bunch of childcare facilities that are federally funded, and he finds that almost all of them are empty, or at least he didn't figure this out, but Project Veritas and some local guy seemed to have figured this out and kind of handed him this story. In this 45-minute expose, it seems to demonstrate pretty definitively that we're looking at well over $100 million in fraud. That's you and I being robbed blind to fund this Somali racket. And if you think it's not a racket, I want you to hear what one of the proprietors of one of these facilities had to say the next day when they were allegedly robbed.
Yesterday morning, I was called by the owner because, unfortunately, someone came in to our daycare. We saw that there was important documentation, enrollment of the children, and also employee documentation that was gone. There were also checkbooks that were ripped from our check papers that were ripped from our book. This is devastating news, and we don't know why this is targeting our Somali community.
So maybe this guy's telling the truth, but let's put on our critical thinking cap for a second and just ask yourself, if you were going to go robbing a business, would you go to a childcare facility and then steal their enrollment paperwork or their employee staffing paperwork? Of what value would that be to a burglar? Or option B, you are running a front, basically a welfare fraud scheme, and you don't have any children enrolled in your facility and you don't have any employees, and you want to cover that fact up, and you say, someone broke into our business and they stole all of the documentation you're looking for. Our apologies. I'm going to go with option B being more probable. Now, instead of getting caught up in the minutia of this case, let's hear how people are reacting to it, because this is an inflection point, the likes of which I don't think I've ever seen before.
You have to make the punishment infinitely worse than the crime. And I'm talking about deporting the entire family, denaturalizing the entire family, sending the entire group of them back to Somalia. That's what needs to happen. If you want me to be honest, I'm really not interested in voting, because why is it that I'm going to vote for a slow rot of my country whenever the solution is so obvious? You can't flip the switch. Yeah, you can. You can easily flip the switch. You just do it. If J.D. Vance does not push for treason with capital punishment against Tim Walz, do not vote for him. If Trump does not deliver that, do not vote for him. Unless the most extreme, dramatic, brutal, aggressive option is on the table, I'm staying home. I'm staying home, bro.
Treason with capital punishment. And Asmongold is not the only one being totally radicalized.
I want to talk about how the average American is starting to feel as major corruption is being exposed, especially now with the case in Minnesota and the daycare fraud. This is not just about money being stolen anymore. It's about a growing feeling that being a good citizen, being a hardworking person, paying your taxes may not be worth it. People are starting to feel stupid. They think, well, I'm here, I'm playing by the rules, I am working hard, I'm providing for my family, I'm doing the hard work, and I'm the idiot. It's also deeply sad, because the next thing is, why am I even doing this? And that's the part that no one wants to talk about, because this kind of feeling shapes culture. I come from Brazil, as you know, and in Brazil we have this thing we call the Brazilian way, which is the idea that there's always a shortcut, there's always a loophole, a way to take advantage of a situation. And people think it comes out of nowhere. Oh, it's just the Brazilian way of living. No, this comes from years of Brazilian people being robbed and nothing being done with the thieves. So we now think that survival means cheating the system before it cheats you. Eventually, people stop believing that being honest is rewarded. When a society teaches its citizens that being honest makes you a loser, well, that's really dangerous. You don't just lose money, you lose trust, you lose dignity, you lose the culture that holds it all together. And once that's gone, it's really hard to get back.
The point that lady is making is actually really profound, and we need to go a little bit deeper on it. What she's describing there, without saying it explicitly, is the difference between a high trust and a low trust society or civilization. We have, in America, throughout my entire life, lived in what's described as a high trust society. Now, high trust societies come from a multitude of factors. For instance, usually it comes from ethnic or at least cultural homogeneity, which means people either look the same or they think the same and they treat each other similarly. Therefore, everybody is kind of on their best behavior because they expect to be treated with that same type of respect. Additionally, another key factor is that you have a justice system which represents principles and values that supersede any sort of ethnic divides. We now have neither. We don't have ethnic homogeneity, we don't have cultural homogeneity, and we do not have a justice system that actually respects our rights, as evidenced by this fraud that's happening in Minnesota, largely perpetrated by Somali immigrants. Now, as a consequence of having neither of those three key things, we are rapidly declining into a low trust society. What happens in a low trust society? Well, people start to lie. People start to cheat and steal because they feel as if that is the only way to get ahead. People also start to vote for socialism. All of those things are happening, tragically. And honestly, I'm not sure if it's reversible. And the reason I say that is not because the people don't want it. The people clearly do. The American people, by and large, do agree with what I'm saying right now, and they would absolutely like to see these people held to account. But it goes so much deeper than that. It's basically impossible to hold these people to account because this is a systemic issue. These are government-ran programs. And with big government-ran programs comes immense fraud, which is essentially unavoidable. And let me just remind you, over the past year, as the bought and paid for MAGA influencers have been waging a relentless war, a relentless propaganda campaign against one Thomas Massie and to a lesser extent, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie was the one who was trying to stop the continuing resolution spending bills that funded these very programs in Minnesota. He was also trying to force disclosures on the Epstein case. He was doing everything that Trump campaigned on, that MAGA said they wanted. What did he get for it? A $23 million primary bounty campaign placed on his head by the Adelsons and a bunch of other Epstein network folks. And Trump is just constantly blasting him publicly and saying he needs to be removed from power because he's the one reputable, honest congressman we've got, so he's got to go. But anyways, long story short, he is trying to strike the root. He's trying to go after these programs which allow for this incredible, immense fraud, which ultimately circles back largely to the Democrat Party, but I would imagine significantly to scummy Republicans as well. But Mike Johnson and Trump and Jim Jordan and all these big tough talkers, they all want to see Thomas Massie go. And they're all telling you, oh, we're going to pull out the stops. We're going to go after these Somali fraudsters in Minnesota. No, I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. They may go after the low-level people They're not going to go after the higher level folks, the politicians that actually greenlit all this stuff. You don't get away with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of fraud for years if this isn't actually being greenlit at the political level. And my evidence of that is that if they actually didn't want these things to be happening, well, they would have stood shoulder to shoulder with Thomas Massie. He tried to end these very programs, the funding for these very programs.
The GOP deserves to be burned to the fucking ground. And they want to say, well, we'll never come back from that. Well, it'll take us all this time to rebuild. But this. Then you better get your ass in overdrive. Don't come and cry to me, well, we're trying to win in 28 and you're not being a good member of the team. I'm not a member of the team. I don't have a jersey and I don't have a contract and I'm not getting fucking paid. You ran the table and the voters delivered and now you're fucking stealing. You're not delivering, you're flapping your gums, and you want us to go out and vote again in 28? We should go out and destroy you in 28. We should go out and absolutely burn you to the ground in 28. They go in July and say, you want the Epstein tapes? I don't need your vote. You want the Epstein tapes? You're a sucker. You want me then to go and campaign for this shit? JD Vance, you better march down to the Oval Office and get this guy awake from his nap and fix the country, or none of us are turning out in 28.
Well, there's the one major thing Nick Fuentes and I have in common. I don't have a contract. I don't have a jersey. You aren't fucking paying me. And as a consequence, I get to tell the truth. Big problem for you. So I'm going to tell the truth. Yeah, you have all three branches of government. Even I, who was nearly the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, broke down in the last 48 hours before the election and said, you know what, Kamala Harris is such a disaster. I'm just going to roll the dice and hope beyond hope that Trump is serious about going after the deep state, especially after they tried to put him in prison for 700 years. And we're now nearly a year in, and there is 0 deep state arrests. 0. So, yeah, I don't think it's Candace Owens' fault or Nick Fuentes' fault or mine or Dave Smith or anybody else's fault that you're going to get obliterated in the midterms. You're going to lose everything. And in 28, you'll almost certainly, unless you really turn things around, you'll almost certainly lose the White House too. That ain't my fault. That's yours. You had a mandate. You had an opportunity. You had a green light, the greenest green light you have ever had from the American people. Go after the government itself. Go after the root of the problem. This isn't even a partisan issue. This is not strictly a Republican thing. There's tons of Democrat voters and independents that would love to see it. They would love to see the corrupt politicians, which have been robbing us blind for a century plus, cuffed, perp walked, and imprisoned forever. And instead, you decided to continue funding the Ukraine war. You continued to greenlight everything that Israel wanted, including funding their war, but also bombing Iran. You also then decided to start a war against Venezuela inexplicably under the pretense of stopping fentanyl, which doesn't even come from Venezuela. Great sales job on that one, by the way. You bombed Nigeria. You continued record spending. You didn't bring anybody in the deep state to justice. You didn't even prosecute or indict anybody aside from John Bolton, which will probably be thrown out. You didn't go after Anthony Fauci. You didn't go after any of the people, the perpetrators behind Operation COVID. You didn't get inflation under control. You continued to debase our currency. You continued the record spending that happened under the Biden administration. You have rates of deportation, which don't even come close to dealing with just the illegal immigration flood that transpired during Biden's presidency, much less dealing with any of the other tens of millions that are already here illegally. And while failing to do all of that, you did have time, though, to have Bibi Netanyahu visit you 5 times. The most that a prime minister of Israel has ever seen an American president in person in a single calendar year in American history. The closest count prior was, in fact, Bill Clinton in the year 2000 when he was trying to negotiate a peace and a 2-state settlement. So in light of this Somali fraud expose, it'll give a lot of red meat to your base. It'll allow for the GOP politicians to come out and talk tough and say, we're going to drag Tim Walz in front of Congress, and we're going to question him and demand answers and blah, blah, blah. Well, let me just tell you, if you don't deliver on justice on this one, you're going to forever lose your base. I mean, it's so egregious, caught red-handed on video. in HD. And if you still can't deliver on this level of justice, I'm not even talking about bringing down Tim Walz. That would be great if you did. But I'm talking about just the lowest level fraudsters. Can you actually deport those 80 or so people? I'm betting on no, actually. I don't think you will, because I just don't think that you guys are serious. I think that we're so late in empire collapse at this junction that the real urgency that you see from our government right now is not to deliver on promises. It's not to basically quell our concerns or quiet us down. It's just to get as much gold off of our boat and into your own before we sink as humanly possible. That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. That's what it is, really. We, you, I, are being looted. The American people, the American nation, the landmass with the most natural resources and most industrious, incredible, genius civilization to have ever existed on the planet Earth is being robbed blind. And it's being done most egregiously by the people who promised to stop it. Oh, there was one other thing that Thomas Massie tried to get actually cemented. That was the Doge cuts. If you recall, when Elon Musk left the White House with that black guy. Interesting timing on that one, wasn't it? Well, Nick Shirley uncovered 100 million or so in fraud, maybe billions. Elon and Doge, they were uncovering hundreds of billions. If you remember, he was talking in the first few months of Doge's existence. He was talking about how we think that there may be trillions in fraud. Do you think that Elon Musk left Doge unceremoniously because he just stopped being passionate about cutting waste and abuse and fraud? No, I don't think so. I think he left because his life was threatened. For sure. Our system is actually built on fraud. And it really starts its inception point. If you want to strike the root, if you want to understand where this actually begins, all you need to understand is central banking. Debasement of our currency is really the greatest avenue for mass theft and looting that exists technologically, that exists on Earth ever. And that's really where it begins. If you debase the currency, you can essentially loot a significant percentage of the entire world's wealth every single year. And they've been doing that ever since 1913. And for a while, that was good enough, right? They felt like, we could take more, but then they'd catch on, they'd revolt, they'd overthrow us. So let's just continue to steal 3 to 5% annually. That's enough for us. And then as the national debt explodes, as the military-industrial complex continues to grow, and basically we become insolvent because we're now approaching $40 trillion in debt as a nation, in part because of central banking and because our government is so fucking profligate. The interest alone on the national debt will exceed $1 trillion this year and every year moving forward, increasingly so, to the tune of 2, 3, 4, 5 trillion. We only bring in 7 trillion in federal tax receipts. So actually, I think it's only 5 trillion. We spend 7 trillion annually. So in a matter of a decade or two at most, we will be spending all of our federal tax receipts just on carrying the national debt alone. What does that mean? It means the game is over. It means that they will have no choice but to monetize the entirety of not just the national debt, but also the incredible expenditures that the federal government is required to make. So they're going to be debasing the currency more and more rapidly. So what does that mean? It means that they have to circle and cycle out to a different nation. This is not an opinion. This is mathematics. They will have to have a new global hegemon. Who will that be? China? I don't know. It'll be someone other than us. It'll be a currency other than the US dollar. But as I said, we've only got a decade or two left. So what do you do when you have 150 years of theft and looting to participate in? Do you do it fast or do you do it slow? You do it slow because you want it to last. When you recognize that you only have a decade or two left at most, you start to do it fast because everybody's thinking to themselves the same thing. The ship is sinking. Get the gold off their boat. Get it into our own. And that's what's happening. And that's why, while the Somali story is important and it's certainly indicative or a great example of what I'm talking about, it's a very small level example. And you want to know how I know that the ship of America, aka the USS Titanic, is taking on water? Over the past month, the Federal Reserve has begun doing reverse repos and infusing capital into the markets in a way that we have not seen since the year 2020 during lockdowns. This is with the stock market at all-time highs and everything going great. Air quotes for those that are listening. This is a big deal. Every precious metal asset is skyrocketing, hitting record highs, sometimes doubling record highs. Silver in particular, it's up, I think it's at $72 as of today. It topped out at $75 a couple days ago. For those that don't know, the price of silver per ounce had been 20 to 30 for quite a while. I think the highest ever prior was 50 back in the 80s when the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market. So we're now 50% above that. There's something big happening, and I think that the financial world is taking notice to it. I should also add what's happening with silver is there has been immense short pressure on it for a very long time, and there's a short squeeze that's happening right now. We probably won't know what banking institutions will be going bust as a consequence of it, but I would imagine that the reason that the Fed is doing these reverse repos to the tune of $26 billion in multiple days, allegedly December 31st, the last day of the first year of Trump's presidency, was the largest infusion of capital from the Fed in history, was what I read, which can't be true because I'm sure back in 2008 it was bigger. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyways, it sounds to me like there's some banking institutions that are on the brink of collapse. I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention because these are the hallmarks of a banking contagion, which could mean a recession is in the offing. And if it is, well, then strap in because next year will be crazy. Let's hope not. It's time to get into why you should be skeptical of this Somali fraud reporting coming out of Minnesota. It seems totally legit. The video kind of speaks for itself. You're like, all right, I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and I know what fraud looks like, and that's what fraud looks like. Well, here's what an Israeli reporter had to say, and I know you're thinking to yourself, this can't be true, but just bear with me.
How is the Israeli Mossad related to the recent corruption that was discovered in Minnesota? You're not going to believe it, but there actually is a substantial connection, and it runs through the Israeli Prime Minister office. I'll start from the end. Israel just established relationships with Somaliland, which is not Somalia. But the backstory to the whole Minnesota corruption story is that much of those funds, 9 billion of those, were sent back to support terrorism, or what they would call the Muslim Brotherhood actions, and this is tied into Qatar. And Israel, of course, was behind the scenes, and I know people love these conspiracies, in leaking some of the information that is responsible or related to the funding of terrorism using that exact money. So the fact that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has a phone call and recognizes Somaliland is tied into Qatar being a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, tied into the Somali funds that were stolen in Minnesota funding terrorism in the Middle East.
And if you're like me, you're thinking to yourself, oh, Clint, not everything has to do with Israel. Sometimes it's just Somalis committing fraud. I know. I would have thought that too if I were you and I didn't know what I know. So just bear with me. But Nick Shirley went on PBD yesterday and he's saying, I'm as clean as a whistle. They'll never get me. So let me be clear. I'm not accusing Nick Shirley of anything. I think that his journalism may very well be totally legitimate and he just, sweat of his brow, he discovered and put out this story and it goes super viral, right? But here's the thing. I, Clint Russell, got offered money to share his posts. Yeah. I was already sharing his posts and talking about the story for free because it was the biggest story in the country at the time. Then I look at his video and I see it has over 100 million views. Then I look at his Twitter feed or his Twitter following and he had about 200,000 followers about a month ago and he's at 1,050,000 today. So he has 5x'd his following, his video, which is investigative reporting, which lots of people do every single day, and they put it out on X, and it never goes viral like this. And then I find out that, there's actually a paid campaign to boost his work and to boost him. So I'm not saying that Mr. Shirley is actually the one orchestrating this. I don't know that. All I do know is that there was money being offered to boost his content, to boost this story. And if it weren't for that, I would totally dismiss this Israeli reporter guy who says that this is all about funneling money back to Somalia to fund Al-Shabaab, which is a terrorist group there. And I would be like, okay, that sounds like nonsense to me. But now that I know that there is major money that boosted that story, tells me that there is a high probability that in fact there is an ulterior motive for that story going as viral as it did. So my warning to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that I would be very nervous that perhaps we are preparing for some sort of bombing campaign against Somalia. And they want us to be very angry with Somalis because of this fraud story. Now, I could be totally wrong. And we'll see. We're going to find out over the next couple months if my concerns are valid or not. But I just thought that was important for you to know. So I'm not going to tell you who offered me the money because I want my contacts to still continue to send me these type of offers because I think it's very valuable to you, the audience. But on my life, it's true. So take that for what it's worth. Isn't it interesting how the influencer world works? That sometimes it's just a really compelling, outrageous story about fraud in Minnesota goes super viral and you're like, well, it's just a very outrageous story and it totally organically went crazy viral. And if it weren't for me, you could still live in that delusion. Sorry. I would almost like to live in that delusion too. But that's just not how the world works. There is money being exchanged for every purpose under the sun you could imagine. It's crazy. I don't think I've said Happy New Year's to you guys yet, but it is. Happy New Year. 2025 was a crazy, crazy year for me. As you guys know, I lost my father and it was brutal, but also very spiritually aligning. And I really appreciate the support you guys lended me during that period. The show has never been more successful. I've never reached more people, not even close. I mean, the explosive growth we had, I think we tripled in size over the past year. And it's all because of you guys. So I just wanted to thank you again. Thank you for the support. Thank you for sharing the show. And thank you for the kind words. It means a lot. It was a very rough year, but also probably the most, satisfying, gratifying year of my life in a lot of ways too. So I just wanted you to know that despite the fact that I cover a lot of very negative stories and there's a lot of negative news to cover, unfortunately, I'm not a pessimist. I'm actually very optimistic, and I'm largely optimistic because of you guys, because of the audience that I have to hear these radical, liberty-oriented ideas. Just to give you perspective on that, over the past 30 days, Ben Shapiro has lost 30,000 followers. Over the past 30 days, despite taking 10 days off, Liberty Lockdown, this show, grew by 35,000 subscribers. So, the world is healing. Fear not. Worry not. Do not despair. Have hope. Understand that Ben Shapiro's decline is indicative of victory, of success. We have not prevailed, but we are on the path to prevailing. And it's all because of you. It gives me a lot of hope, particularly given that our media apparati are totally fraudulent and corrupt. Most of our independent media is now totally fraudulent and corrupt and bought off. The political elite, aside from Thomas Massie, as best I can tell, are entirely bought off and criminal and corrupt. And yeah, if you're looking at all that and you're saying to yourself, there's really no reason to be hopeful, Clint. Well, no, that's how it has always been. It's just that now you know it. Now, because of the decentralized nature of the internet, now because of the lowering of barriers of entry for people like me to speak their mind to large audiences, now because of the internet itself, we have an opportunity to understand the corruption and rot that's all around us. We are in the middle of an awakening, a mass awakening. And that doesn't mean it's not going to be painful. That doesn't mean it's not going to be tumultuous and perhaps violent. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be major setbacks. But the real truth is that the only way out is through. And the only way through is with the truth. And that's what I try and bring to you guys every day. So I know it's not every day. I know many of you guys are really angry with me for taking 10 days off. I had to go visit my family. I'm sorry. But anyways, that's all I can really promise you, is that I am 100% dedicated to the truth and continuing to try and provide that to the best of my ability. And as long as you guys enjoy that and keep watching, I'll keep doing it. Love you guys. Peace.
Subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. Great podcast. Clint is tight.